In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. On the third Sunday of Lent, we have a very instructive gospel from the canonical Gospels, in this case from St. John, of the famous tale of the woman taken in adultery. And we had it read for us, so I don't need to repeat it. But I think from it there are some very significant and perhaps some more uniquely Gnostic conclusions that we can draw. The overall conclusion is one which is manifest in many of the Gnostic scriptures, sometimes in those very words, that the Lord Christ had come to abrogate. And abrogate is sort of a lovely word, but let's say it means to do away with, you know. So I don't know if you have a large violin spider in your kitchen, you abrogate it. But let's say to abrogate the old law and to bring in the new law, which is the law of love, and which he has stated. And so that's the, let's say, that is the overall consideration. And the second one, of course, which is certainly related to that, is the issue of condemnation of people, condemnation of each other. And thereby I would think, and have not analyzed this linguistically, but what we have here is the term condemnation denotes moral condemnation, which means that somebody is a bad person and they don't do things right. Okay? And it is this kind of condemnation that the Lord does away with at this time. And he does it in a very clever way, by asking people, well, have you done anything that may be worthy of the kind of treatment that you are giving to this person? And they look at themselves and they say, yeah, I guess so. And they all march out. So he has taught them self-reflection. Look at yourself and see what is really going on with you before you go and condemn others. And this, of course, is also a very, very great and very mighty, I would say, spiritual act. And I think the way we need to treat these issues is that truly we have not come into this world, we haven't been called to be the judges. When we were born into the world, nobody shouted, "Here come the judge." That's not our thing. That's not what we came into this world to do. And so it's really the sort of thing that we should not engage in. Now, does this mean that personally and within our own way of dealing with the world, we cannot feel positively about some things and more negatively about others? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that we should not condemn people and judge them as people of bad character, of sinful and terrible nature because of our impression of them. We should leave that sort of thing, if to anybody at all, to some higher authority. And of course into it works the whole difficulty, which we have not rid ourselves yet in our culture, of the shadow of many elements of the Old Testament. The Gnostic attitude as far as we are able to discern, so to look at the various Gnostic groups, was never that the Old Testament is totally useless. And that could be a bad judgment anyway, because there are some beautiful things in the Old Testament. We have to remember the whole wisdom literature, which really relates to Chokmah Sophia, is in the Old Testament. Wisdom of Solomon and various others, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, and so forth. And there would be a terrible shame to do away with those. But what they said was, the Gnostic fathers said, that the Old Testament is, might as well use a Jewish word, a mishmash. And in it there are elements which come from a high and a holy source. But there are other elements, often in some books, perhaps in the majority, that come from elsewhere, that come from the demiurge, come from the archons. Angry and condemnatory and sort of nasty spiritual powers, spiritual wickedness in high places, that has snuck into that scripture and has made much of it of anything but a holy character. And so we see that there are, Moses told us to do this, that such should be stoned. Jesus doesn't come out of it that way, but he works around it very, very wisely and essentially indicates, you know, boys, I don't particularly care what Moses told you. I am telling you, and you can tell it to yourself. If you have really self-reflection and insight into your own doings, that this kind of condemnation is wrong. And so I think this is a very important issue to keep in mind, because this is it is probably the greatest curse of our culture, that we keep on carrying along the Old Testamentary, judgmental, cruel attitude, which is often called puritanical for historical reasons, and that we won't let go of it. And it's always there. Now we have seen, you have seen, I have seen, all of you have seen, because I don't, maybe the little baby back there has not seen it. But you know, we have seen in our lifetimes, you know, big, tremendous social changes in our society. At least this is the one that we live in. And many of these have sort of taken out of the dustbin, such a wonderful British expression, you know, dustbin. I think it's something that we all should use more often. But anyway, out of the dustbin, it sounds so much better than garbage can, you know. In any event, out of the dustbin of history have been confined to the dustbin, you know, a whole number of really silly, condemnatory attitudes of society about various things. Many of them having to do with sex, which is always the big bugaboo, even in this particular biblical passage. And I think on the whole we can say that those changes in our society have been of a salutary nature. But, and this is a great big but, of course our puritanical psyche, national psyche, was quick to bring in other causes which allow people to condemn their brothers and their sisters. You know, so we made a moral issue out of smoking, for instance, smoking tobacco, not so much of smoking other things which may have been an issue before. We are about to make a moral issue out of the use of fossil fuels and heaven knows what other claptrap, you know. And the curious thing about it is that the way these things come across in our society are always by way of a moral issue, you see. If you smoke, especially cigarettes, but even some of my favorite cigars or things of that sort, it's not just that you may be damaging your health. I know all about that, you know. My mother died of lung cancer, all-time smoker. And, you know, it's not just that you damage your health. No, it is underneath it, you are a bad person. You see, you are a bad person. There is the moral condemnation. And among vegetarians and vegans and other peculiar folk, we have the same thing, of course, regarding diet. You know, it's not on any other reason. The other reasons, some of which are maybe mildly valid, they go by the wayside. That maybe you shouldn't kill animals for food. You know, various people thought so. The Catars thought so. Although they said that they wouldn't raise animals for killing, but what ran in the forest and what swam in the creek you could partake of. You know, it's a variety on the theme. But there also, there are none of these issues, but the issue is that if you do that particular deed, culinary deed in this case, you are a bad person. You are meat eaters are morally inferior to herbivores, shall we say. So that this moral judgment is always there. And this is the real difficulty. Because a moral judgment is something that is addressed to and that penetrates really the deeper nature of the person whom you are condemning. It is addressed against his soul, against his psyche, or hers, and therefore it is really a matter of injuring the psychic structure of the person whom you are condemning. It's the sort of thing that is contrary to the sovereignty of the individual human soul, which is here in order to live on the earth and to make perform certain actions, and to perhaps hopefully discover the greater life and then move toward that. And if we are confronting people with these moral judgments, we are disturbing their progress on the path, so to say. And so we need to recognize that there is a malefic impulse, there is a malefic strain in our culture, which is the strain of moral condemnation. And of course, in history, various people appeared who reinforced that. One of them being our favorite whipping boy, John Calvin. You know, Luther wasn't that way. You know, Luther was a sincere old beer-drinking German. You know, he tried to follow Christ. He tried to be the reformer of Christ. Calvin was the reformer who came from the demiurge straight. And you got to remember that in his secular profession he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer, you know. And you know, these are the people who have continued with these really very, very deleterious attitudes, which have become a part of Christendom, and which I think still afflict us greatly, and which move us from one object to the other. When it's not this anymore, then it is something else, but the condemnation is still there and is still going on. And so I think this is something that we have to combat within ourselves. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't make human judgments in general. It says, all right, you know, this, I don't know, this fellow broke into my car and stole my briefcase with whatever was in it, and, you know, and he's therefore a no-goodnik, you know, for having done that. And of course, I mean, we have to have some of these issues, but not to make a sort of metaphysical moral issue out of things, and certainly not personal habits which really only affect the person involved, whatever the case may be, smoking or this or the other thing. And so we should pull back from that kind of thing. I know that the temptation is great because it's part of that complex that Gerald Hurd of blessed memory said, adrenaline addiction. We love to get mad. We love to get angry. And you know, adrenaline is something that our own chemical lab inside produces, and therefore it's not even illegal. You know, not even the U.S. government has managed to declare adrenaline illegal, because if it had done so, it would have made a lot of people angry. It is something, therefore, that it's tempting to act as the judge of other people. But probably the best argument against it is the one that Jesus uses in this particular story, which means I say, okay, buddy, look at yourself. You know, are you really that great? Are you really that good? Are you really that much without any fault? And if you are really such, and you have some of your own difficulties, well, you know, try to deal with those. Don't go out and condemn others. So this is it is a serious issue in our society and all over the world, because certainly the condemnation on the basis of what people conceive as being moral or even spiritual grounds is there, and in some places the way that is treated is, you know, let's say very dramatically terrible. Such as the throat cutters and crucifiers of whom we hear right now. Now, is it legitimate for us to be angry at these people and what they do? I think it is. My way of trying to deal with that sort of thing is more like an old Quaker joke that you may have heard. The Quaker comes back into his house, and there's a burglar in the house. Went in, and so the Quaker has his blunderbuss in hand, and he says, "Friend, I don't wish to harm thee, but thou standest where I'm about to shoot." And so, you know, there are practical issues of that sort, of people who are for one reason or the other really are doing terrible things that should be put out of commission, and that is part of living in this mixed up and terrible world, and it is part of humans interacting with each other. But at the same time, let us devote our energies to things that are ultimately so much more productive than condemning each other. You know, we all, no matter where you happen to be in terms of your age and so forth, we all, young and old, we don't have unlimited time. And our time should not be used up by going around being angry at people, condemning them, imagining that they have hurt us even when they don't, and things of that sort. but this should be demanded to cleaning up our own house, and as Jung, Jung receives the message in his red book, tending our own garden. You know? There's a lot to be tended in our garden. We all have some pretty nasty weeds growing there. And if we now and then pull out one or the other, then we are that much better off. And not yield to the truly archonic impulse of condemning each other. And that's to a major extent is really the message. And of course, as some of you may recall, that a kind of a common expression about the season of Lent is that you give up something for Lent. Well, I don't know, I never really did that. What I've got, I keep. I don't give it, I don't give it up. Yeah. But maybe one thing that we could kind of think about giving up is condemning others. Acting morally superior and picking various little things that allow us to be condemnatory toward other people. And I think you will agree with me that if you lived already for a while in this world and you observed people and what they do and so forth, that the people who are most anxious to condemn other people are almost inevitably the very people who have a lot of stuff in themselves and in their actions that is worthy of some kind of condemnation. And so if we abstain from that sort of thing, if we give up condemnation for Lent, then maybe we have done something pretty useful and pretty important, because we really align ourselves with the unsavory forces of the universe when we do that. I don't want to make a big deal out of this now, but I think it is a big deal. Because the judges, the condemners, the persecutors are the spiritual wickedness in high places, are the archons, as the Gnostics tell us. We get into alliance with unsavory forces and beings when we do that. So the condemnatory and angry attitude toward others is a very undesirable thing. And it is really, really the sort of thing that pulls us in to the actions of, well, I don't mind calling it by its name, to evil. And you can see how that works on the individual level, you can see how it works on a larger level in history, and we ought to stay out of it. So maybe a nice little resolution that we could take home on this Sunday of Lent is that we will give up condemning and tend our own internal spiritual and soul garden. And let's hope that we can do that, and so may the mystery of that which hangs twixt heaven and earth descend upon us and remain with us always. Amen.